Flowers, chocolates, jewelry, and romantic candlelight dinners. That's how millions of people worldwide celebrate Valentine's Day. Here in the U.S., it's celebrated every February 14th. In contrast, the man the holiday is named after, St. Valentinus, the Bishop of Terni, Italy, was tortured and beheaded, martyred for his faith in Christ. Here to set us straight is screenwriter, director, and author Sheldon Collins. His latest book is The Legend of Valentine. Sheldon, thank you for joining us. So tell us more about Valentinus, St. Valentine. Who was he? What happened to him and why?
Sure. Nice to be here, Gary. Thanks for having me on your show. The history of St. Valentine, like you said, generally centers on a 3rd century Roman. It was around the time period of 268 AD. His name was Valentine, but he also, the Latin name was Valentinus, like you said, and he was an early Christian, and we know that he defied the emperor at the time, who was Claudius II. However, historians will debate exactly what this exact defiance was. They believe he had a part in performing Christian marriages. And from there, that's really where the history stops and the legend begins. And so in my novel, what I chose to do is just to explore how that story of a Christian man who was believed to have died for his faith and love became one of the most endearing legends in human history.
Well, tell me, how did this horrific martyrdom evolve into a day of candy, flowers, and romance?
That's a great question. So if we go back and we look at the timeline of the legend, what transpired in the 3rd century is what I just articulated. And from there, it became very interesting. In the 6th to 9th century, during early church preservation, Valentine appears in martyrologies. So the church starts to honor saints at the time, and the purpose was really remembrance, not storytelling. There was no miracles layered into the legend at that time. There was no romance. The legend remains thin and undefined. However, by the 12th and 13th century, the medieval hagiography time period, miracles begin to emerge. And this is where the legend develops into Valentine restoring the sight to a blind woman. And that blindness is used symbolically to represent spiritual awakening, of course. And all of a sudden, the legend grows more and more. And then by the 14th century, this was an interesting shift. It was really a major shift in the legend. The time period that Geoffrey Chaucer wrote Parliament of the Fowls, he came up with this key line that he said, "For this was on St. Valentine's Day, when every bird comes there to choose his mate." And for the first time, Valentine's Day is associated with love, pairing, and nature. However, there's no mention of Valentine as a character. The romance becomes attached to the date, not the man. And then we jump to the 16th and early 17th century, the Renaissance time period. And this is when the legend expanded to the contribution of William Shakespeare, when he wrote Hamlet. And in Hamlet, Ophelia says, "Tomorrow is St. Valentine's Day, all in the morning of betime, and I am made at your window to be your Valentine." And this is the idea of choosing, being chosen, the personal romantic expectation. And this is where the modern concept of my Valentine truly takes shape. And lastly, we come into the 18th century, the romantic correspondence. And this is when Valentine's Day is linked to handwritten love letters. There's the emergence of the legend that wrote a farewell note saying, "From your Valentine." And of course, in the Victoria era, we had the mass production of Valentine cards. And then we get into the 20th century when there's the full commercializations of cards, candy, jewelry, media, and so forth. And finally, in the 21st century, I introduced a new layer of the legend, basically that love, in fact, overcomes, and faith, in fact, overcomes adversity. So that's the development of the legend over nearly 1,800 years, to answer your question, and how we got to candy and chocolates and so forth.
So a lot of money made off of someone who was beheaded. 1,800 years later, historians, as you mentioned, they're still a bit uncertain about him. Even your book title says The Legend of St. Valentine. So he was a real person, though, right? He did marry Roman soldiers and others against the wishes of the government. Tell us a little more. Or was he just a legendary figure like Robin Hood?
Well, he was a real person, like you said, Gary. I mean, but in terms of And we know, like I said earlier, that he was an early Christian and he defied the emperor at the time, Claudius II. That defiance, we believe it was Christian marriages that he was doing or Christian gatherings that he was doing at the time. Historians, or at least when I spoke to historians and had them fact check different points in my novel, my historical fiction novel, they would debate exactly what those acts were. We believe it was in defiance of him marrying Christians at the time. And so this is, I think, but what's important, though, however, is that the whole story is rooted in a man who had faith and who had heart and was courageous. And this is what I chose to really focus, at least my story, on. And it is anchored in a real man at that time period and all iterations of that. And I think, when I thought about it after writing it, is that at the heart of every version of the legend is a man who acted out of faith and loved with courage. And that's what took conviction. It took sacrifice. And that courage rooted in faith is why the story still speaks to us today.
Quite an example for us. So in 2020, CBN released the successful docudrama I Am Patrick, the Patron Saint of Ireland. You're a screenwriter, a director. Any plans to turn your novel, The Legend of Valentine, into a film?
Yes, actually. I'm working on that right now. So it's really been a three-tier process to climbing the top of the storytelling mountain here. So the first was writing the novel, and the second was actually directing the audiobook, which came out in October with 20 voice actors included. And we were very excited to win the Sova's Voice Arts Award for Outstanding Audiobook of the Year and the Independent Press Award. And all of that was to lay the foundation for hopefully turning this into a limited series. So right now, we are speaking to the studios. I do have production partners who I'm teamed up with, and I have written the limited series version of this that is based completely off the book itself. And King Arthur and Robin Hood, those are good legends to point to, or St. Patrick's Day, as you said. But what's so exciting about this is I do believe that it is really one of the world's greatest celebrated legends of all time. And it's just so exciting to me to see how they estimate somewhere between 2 to 4 billion people worldwide come together to celebrate this wonderful day of love and faith.
Yeah, that's a lot more than St. Paddy's Day, which is basically just an Irish holiday. Yeah. Okay, the book is The Legend of Valentine. Sheldon Collins, thank you for setting us straight today about Valentine's Day.
Thanks so much for having me on, and thank you to the listeners out there who listen to this. Appreciate you.